My story, your passion. Your story, like mine, begins and ends with passion, the surest path to learning a new language. In late July, in late July 2003, just a couple of weeks after my 21st birthday, I moved to Valencia, Spain. To help me adjust to life in a foreign country, I enrolled in a Spanish class. It was a small class and it was taught entirely in Spanish, which was a bit of a problem for me because I only understood English. I had just graduated with a degree in electronic engineering, and I had barely passed the German and Irish courses I took in high school. Languages were definitely not my thing. After several classes, I was getting absolutely nowhere. Each lesson ended with the other students wearing great big satisfied smiles on their faces. I knew they had figured out something about the language that they didn't know before. While I still couldn't understand a single word, my ego was destroyed. I was, without a doubt, the worst student in the class, and as I walked home with my head hung low, I couldn't help thinking, it's not fair. Why were those guys blessed with the language learning gene and I wasn't? I'm never going to learn Spanish. After 6 months in Spain, I could barely muster up the courage to ask how much something cost or where the bathroom was. I really started to think I would never learn Spanish. I began to worry my experience immersed in a different country would be a total failure. I was convinced my destiny was to spend the rest of my life speaking only English. Fast forward 7 years, one night in Budapest, I ended up at a couch surfing party at a local bar with an international crowd. I confidently strolled in and said hello to everyone in Hungarian, one of the most notoriously difficult languages in the world. I started chatting with a local in Hungarian about my progress with this native language. I had been learning it only for about 5 weeks, but I was only able to have this rudimentary chat with him. Next, I noticed a slight Brazilian Portuguese accent from the guy speaking English to my left. I asked, "Você é brasileiro? Are you Brazilian?" And when he told me in Portuguese that he was from Rio, I immediately switched to my Carioca accent, using slang from his own city, telling him how much I missed it. He was shocked to hear an Irish guy speak his own Portuguese dialect in a random bar in Budapest. Then I recognized a Spanish friend of mine across the table and immediately switched to fluent Spanish, asking her how her Hungarian was coming along. Later, a couple from Quebec arrived, and I turned on my Quebec accent expressions while speaking French. We exchanged contact information and made plans to hang out the next day. That night, I also managed to use some Italian and Esperanto and wow a Thai tourist with a few phrases of basic Thai, using all the right tones. I even flirted in German with a German girl I saw regularly at these meetings. In one evening, I spoke 8 languages, including a little English casually, socially, and naturally. I switched between them effortlessly without mixing them up, and more important, made some amazing new friends in the process. Since then, I've learned several other languages, and at the time of writing this, I can confidently use 12 languages in varying degrees of proficiency, from conversational in Dutch, Mandarin, Chinese, and American Sign Language to certified mastery in Spanish, and everything in between from the other 9. I understand the basics of another 12 languages on top of these. I also run fluentin3months.com, the world's largest language learning blog, which to date has helped millions of people around the world learn a new language. All of this is true despite the fact that I spoke only English until the age of 21 and did poorly in my attempts to learn languages in school. How did this happen? How did I go from dropping out my Spanish language class to being able to converse in more than a dozen languages, simply by changing how I approach new languages? The way to learn a language is to live it. One of the biggest issues with the traditional approach to language learning is that the benefits to picking up a new language are constantly postponed. Study this and study that, and then, if you're lucky, in a few years' time, you'll eventually understand the language. As well as being far from the truth, this approach removes the fun and the life from the process. In many education systems, especially in English-speaking countries, languages are taught the same way as any other subject, like geography or history. Teachers provide the facts, vocabulary, so the student will know the language. Or as in mathematics, students do the exercises to understand the rules, grammar. Except on rare occasions, this approach does not produce speakers of the target language, so something clearly needs to be fixed. A language is a means of communication and should be lived rather than taught. A teacher's primary role should be as a language facilitator. A teacher should make sure students use the target language at whatever level they happen to be at, rather than keep them quiet while he or she does all the talking, trying to transfer the informational components of the language into the students' brains. In high school, I had to learn Irish. It was mandatory, and in order to gain admission to university, I needed to pass my exams. As a result, I only cared about learning enough Irish to pass. I didn't care about the language itself. My attitude toward Irish changed completely when I actually took the time to live in the Gaeltacht region of Ireland, where people still speak the language, and I started to make friends using it. The second language I took in high school was German. I took German because Germany is an important economy in Europe, and I figured it would look good to have this language on my resume. German language skills would help me stand out, especially since most people in my year were studying French. Once again, I didn't care about the German language. I just thought learning it might give me secondary benefits, and of course I barely retained anything. I thought German was nothing more than der, die, das tables of impossible to learn grammar. And I imagined Germans were robots that automatically spit out grammatically correct sentences. That is until I met actual Germans and saw firsthand how interesting and fun they were. So fun, in fact, I wanted to get to know them better. This way of thinking allowed me to stop thinking of the German language as a barrier between Germans and me, but instead as a bridge I could cross to communicate with them. In both cases, my initial tangential motivation for learning a language were replaced by a direct motivation to live that language and use it as a means of communication and connection. This is how language courses should work. The best time to veer away from the traditional approach of drilling grammar and word lists into us or providing us with old, boring, and irrelevant texts. Instead, the best courses encourage us to play games and role play in the language. They let students speak the language with one another, which, as I realized with both of the languages I had learned poorly in high school and then much better as an adult, is the truest means of communication. As a result of speaking the language right away, students start to acquire the language rather than learn it as they would other academic subjects. What's your motivation? Let me ask you something. When you first tried to take on the language you were interested in, did you think something like, if I learn this language, then I'll get this benefit? Some benefit that had nothing to do with intrinsically communicating in that language or getting to know a foreign country's culture or people. Benefits like career advancement, impressing people, prestige, passing an exam, crossing something off your bucket list, or other similar reasons or examples of tangential motivations that have nothing to do with the language itself. For so many language learners, that motivation to learn a language is more often than not extrinsic rather than intrinsic. They have no true passion for the language. Their only motivation is almost entirely for the side benefits they theoretically get from speaking a new language, recognizing the bridges to people that language learning opens up as opposed to benefits you may receive someday. is a key ingredient to making language learning faster, more fun, and more efficient. The missing ingredient, passion. In this book, I focus on independent learners rather than those sitting in classrooms. Even if you are talking a classroom course, whether it is taught efficiently or not, you need to be an efficient learner in your free time. When you love learning a language enough to have it fill your free time, then your passion can truly blossom. You can find many new motivation beyond extrinsic ones. This is not to say that these factors automatically lead to failure. Success in your career, for instance, can be a very effective motivating factor. The catch, however, is that these side benefits can't be the main motivators for you to learn a language if you want to learn the language better. You must intrinsically want to speak that language for the language or culture itself. When I eventually rebooted my attempts to learn Spanish, I put aside these superficial reasons that someday Spanish might make me impressive or perhaps even more employable. Instead, I started to learn Spanish specifically to use Spanish with other human beings. This made all the difference. I genuinely wanted to communicate in Spanish and make friends through their native tongue. I also wanted to get to know Spain beyond the superficial experience I had had until then. I was no longer motivated by benefits I might get months or years in the future, or by the idea that speaking Spanish would make me cool. I was genuinely passionate about learning the language in order to communicate directly with and understand other people through reading, watching, and listening to Spanish. So take a moment to ask yourself, what is your motivation for learning a new language? Are you learning a language for the wrong reasons? Even if you indeed need the benefits that result from learning a language, like advancing your career, can you mentally put aside the long-term benefits and embrace learning the language for the inherent beauty of it and the many doors it will open for you? If you change your thinking in this way, all the side benefits will come, but they will come much faster because your new focus will make learning a language happen more quickly and efficiently. The missing ingredient and the single thing I have found that separates unsuccessful language learners from unsuccessful ones is a passion for the language itself. For successful language learners, acquiring a new language is the reward. Give yourself goosebumps. So how do you develop this passion if extrinsic benefits have been clouding your vision? For a start, seek out movies and art and history from the country where your target language is spoken. Listen to music in that language, read books and magazines, find as many sources of audio, video, and text online as you can, and absolutely spend time with native speakers. What you'll notice, I've dedicated an entire chapter to, without requiring that you travel to their countries. Even when I know I'm going to a country and have my flight booked, or even when I'm in the country itself, I can get lazy and make very slow progress unless I make that language a true part of my life. Doing so lets me grow passionate for the language. Here's a good time to tell you about my friend Katsumoto. After speaking and reading Japanese exclusively for just 18 months, he could read technical materials and conduct business correspondence and job interviews all in Japanese. He ultimately landed a job in Japan as a software engineer at a gigantic corporation based in Tokyo. The amazing thing is that Katsumoto reached this stage by living his life in Japanese while in Utah. He filled his world with Japanese virtually. He watched anime, read manga, consumed his favorite sci-fi series dubbed in Japanese, and surrounded himself with everything Japanese during every spare moment of his day, even though he was a full-time computer science student. By integrating his target language into his day-to-day living, he gave himself no escape route. He had no choice but to live most of his days in Japanese. As a result, his passion for the language grew. Today, his motto for learning Japanese or for learning any language remains you don't know a language, you live it. You don't learn a language, you get used to it. Nothing creates passion for a language more than using it. Similarly, nothing I say about why you should learn a new language will be more convincing than the first time you understand your first sentence, or the first time you make yourself understood in a different language. These moments will give you goosebumps, and the immense feeling of satisfaction that comes with them will stay with you forever, as well as thousands of other positive experiences that will follow. The passion ingredient is what makes learning languages worthwhile. You simply have to live that language in whatever way you can to have your passion spark. Spend time with natives of the language. Listen to stream radio, watch TV shows and movies, or read books in the language, and you will spark your passion, which will motivate much more progress than any side benefit could ever hope to inspire. How far are you willing to go? Moses McCormick is a well-known polyglot who often posts online videos in languages that he's learning. He can communicate in varying degrees, from knowing a few phrases to being able to converse very well in about 50 languages. When he was trying to improve his Hmong, an Asian language rarely known to Westerners, he told me the one place where he could consistently practice with native speakers was in online chat rooms. That's all well and good, but one major obstacle was that most chat rooms were often filled with men interested only in meeting girls. They weren't interested in continuing a conversation with another guy. So what did Moses do? He created another screen name and logged in as a woman. A virtual sex change operation, if you will, only taking just an instant and totally reversible. Even when he said he was married, he still found that people were much more eager to chat. Would you go to such lengths to get some practice time in your target language? If not, then maybe you aren't passionate enough to get the results. I'm obviously not saying that logging into a chat room as another gender is a prerequisite for speaking another language, but going to such lengths and being willing to do whatever it takes, no matter what the level of embarrassment, will greatly improve your chances of being successful. The right mentality will launch you forward. Success in language learning doesn't come from having the perfect circumstances or require a perfect language learning system. Success relies heavily on facing challenges with the right mentality, having motivation and passion, and sticking to the learning process until you charge through the brick wall in your way. Someone with mountains of passion will always find a way to progress in his or her target language, even if that person uses inefficient learning approaches or gets stuck on plateaus for long periods of time. There are successful language learners who learn very differently from me, sometimes slower, sometimes faster, sometimes with better language skills or more languages under their belts. Without fail, however, the one thing we always have in common is passion. In fact, every language learning challenge I have ever taken on has had its disappointing failures. I've had moments when I felt like giving up, when I saw others doing much better than I was, and when I had trouble finding people to practice with. I've struggled with conversation that went nowhere, had some rough starts, hit plateaus, forgotten words I should have known, and experienced countless other obstacles that made me feel like a failure, all of which led to many hours of frustration. But I kept going because I wanted to keep going. I had a passion for language, and that's how I've been able to learn to speak 12 languages and counting. Once you learn one new language, you're off and running. Learning the first foreign language gives you the skills to learn a second and then a third faster and more efficiently. In the following pages, I'll show you how to master a new language, with the lessons I've learned and the techniques I've applied while transitioning from a monoglot to a polyglot, plus give you solutions to or ways around difficult problems. Believe me, none of it involves re-engineering your DNA to add in the language gene. Instead, this collection of lessons can be used by any language learner at any stage or any age, and it includes the same lessons millions of people have already been using on my blog, fluentin3months.com. Follow up. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Chinese proverb. The first step in language learning is to make the commitment to do whatever it takes to make your project a success. If you have the passion to do what it takes, no matter what that may require, then this will ensure that you will soon be able to speak your target language. For more on my story and other thoughts on the importance of passion in language learning, check out feed3m.com/intro, where there are videos, links to sites of people mentioned in this chapter, and extra updates designed specifically for readers of this introduction. Destroying 20 common language learning myths. Stop making excuses. There's simply no reason you can't learn a new language, and I'll tell you why. I can't confidently say that any person on earth can learn a second language, no matter what their age, intelligence, working, or living situation is, or what their past attempts to learn languages have been like. When our mentality, motivation, passion, and attitude are kept strong, we have the momentum required to charge on toward language fluency. But there's a catch. Even with the best intentions and most enthusiastic starts, we are all bound to run into challenges along the way. Sometimes before we even begin, or at the very first step of the journey, that prevent us from really starting to learn the language. The thing is, while these obstacles may feel like brick walls preventing us from continuing on our path towards speaking a language, many of them are actually myth that exist nowhere but in our minds. The reason we give for why we can't learn a language often have us second-guessing ourselves, wondering if all this language learning business isn't for us at all. Many may feel too old, untalented, busy, or located too far from any native speakers. There are a host of reasons, excuses, and discouragements we tell ourselves, have been told by others, or just presume to be true. Well, there is no good excuse for not learning a language and advancing toward fluency. I have personally talked to thousands of language learners, with millions more reading my blog over the years, and I have heard about pretty much every possible setback learners have had. And I've had quite a few myself. In this chapter, I share with you the 20 most common retorts people have given me when I tell them they can and should learn a new second language. Some of these you have probably felt yourself, and I'll explain why each of them is baseless, or at least has a good solution, as well as many examples of people who have overcome this challenge before. 1. Are adult language learners at a disadvantage? One of the most common reasons many people give for not even trying to learn a language is that once someone passes a certain age, learning a new language is pointless. This almost feels like common sense. Children are better language learners, people often tell me, and after a certain age, you simply can't learn a language. I know I certainly felt too old already, even at the age of 21. However, the idea has never held any water or been demonstrated as true by any serious scientific study. Instead, there is only a general trend of adults not learning languages as well as children, but this may be true for reasons totally unrelated to age. Adults struggle with new languages, most especially because of a misguided learning approach, their learning environment, or their lack of enthusiasm for the task, all of which can be changed. Fluency in a second language is definitely possible for all ages. The "I'm too old" excuse is one of many self-fulfilling prophecies we'll be coming across in this chapter, By telling yourself you are too old, you decide to not put in the work and thus don't learn the language. The vicious cycle continues. The idea that babies have an advantage over us because their brains are hardwired to learn languages while ours are is also not the case. No matter what language you are taking on, you have a fast head start on any baby learning that language simply because you cannot start from scratch as an adult learner. Starting from scratch is what is truly impossible. There is a huge difference between learning your first language and learning your second. Without the thousands of words that your second language may have in common with your first, a baby has to do much more work that we adult learners so merely take for granted. It took you years to be able to confidently. It took you years to be able to confidently distinguish between all the sounds in your native language. When you start to learn a new language as an adult, there are so many learning processes you get to skip that babies have to spend years working on. How about not needing to learn how to distinguish between sounds like an M and an N, or all the other sounds that the majority of languages have in common? You also don't have to concern yourself with developing the muscles in your voice box and tongue attempt in order to even attempt to make noises with them, or with training your ears to be able to distinguish between male and female voices, or between the particular voices of family members and friends, not just other noises in your environment. Adult language learners also have the advantage of already having been exposed to years of contacts in universal human interaction, which indicates when someone is angry, shouting, or asking a question, or the many other aspects of international body language, intonation, and speech volume. One study at the University of California, Los Angeles, actually found that an incredible 93% of communication of emotions is nonverbal, and a majority of nonverbal communication is universal. A laugh is a laugh across the world. While it's possible that some of these communication cues are built into our DNA to be recognized automatically, babies still need to develop them. They have all this extra work ahead of them, learning how to communicate in general terms before they can even begin to incorporate specific language blocks like vocabulary and grammar. But a language is not just vocabulary and grammar. It's an entire spectrum of communication, from the clothes we wear to our posture, hand gestures, personal space, pauses, volume, intonation, and a host of other verbal and nonverbal cues, most of which are universal among modern cultures. There are definitely exceptions, but if you compare them to the number of similarities, the latter will greatly outnumber the former. An infant picks all of this up over many years before he or she can adequately communicate with adults and other children. This means we adults have much more time and energy to focus on the much smaller aspects of communication, of how words go together. Babies have it hard, and young children still need serious tweaking, even at the age of 6 or so. This is why it takes years before children can be considered good speakers. But this shouldn't be the case for us. When it comes to language learning, an adult can overtake a baby any day because an adult has much less work to do. Even if you're with me so far, you may still say that adults are definitely worse off than preteens and early teenagers who already speak one language well. You might think that their brains are fresher or process new information more quickly than ours. Why bother competing with that? This sounds logical enough, but research has shown that it's not true. A study by the University of Haifa in Israel examined how well different age groups, 8 years olds, 12 years olds, and adults picked up unexplained grammar rules. The study revealed that the adults were consistently better in everything we assured. Adults are not worse language learners, but different language learners. The real problem with adult language learners is the environment in which we try to learn languages. As mentioned in the introduction, a traditional academic environment is already not efficient for children, but this is even more true for adults. If an adult makes a mistakes, If an adult makes a mistake, other adults are less likely to correct that person because they don't want to insult him or her. But the teacher-student dynamic with children makes this less of a problem. A child learning a new language after a certain age can also find it quite hard if the material is presented too academically. In their spare time, children are more likely to want to play video games or enjoy activities not related to language learning. We can send them in an immersion school where they can at least play games with other students in the right language, but they may not want to be there and are often just going because their parents have sent them. Their own rebellious nature may get the better of them. And even in an immersion environment, if they don't want to learn, they won't. Adults, on the other hand, can actively decide to learn a language and justify doing so with many more reasons than a child may come up with, including a greater degree of passion. They can go out of their way to arrange to meet up with people to practice the language. Adults have many more options for language learning strategies and can control their free time more easily than children can. Being the master of your own destiny has its perks. Resourceful and clever adults can even pick up a helpful book on the topic or read blog posts written by a charming Irish polyglot, for instance. Adults are also more analytical. Adults are also more analytical. Adults are also more analytical than children. This creates different sets of advantages for both. Children will indeed be more likely to pick up a language with less conscious effort, but this does not mean they are better at it. Adults who put in a conscious effort can keep up at the same rate of progress, even if making that effort is a little more exhausting. While I prefer to leave grammar aside, more on that later, until I can converse pretty well in a language, when I do get to it, I process the rules and understand the logic behind them much better than a child ever would. Children are better at absorbing a language naturally, but adults do that and combine it with a greater capacity to reason why one sentence works one way over another way. Because all of this, plus implementing a human-centered learning approach, I feel I am a much better language learner now in my 30s than I ever was as an 8, 12, 16, or even 20-year-old. I'm getting better at learning languages with age, not worse. What about when you get much older? I have come across people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and even older starting with their first foreign language and succeeding. I regularly receive emails and comments on my blog from learners of these ages who are making fantastic progress in their target languages. Ultimately, I don't want to argue that adults are better language learners than children, because this has the danger of discouraging those who want their children to do better. My point is that we all have our advantages, and it is much more practical to look at what those advantages are than to dwell on and exaggerate any challenges either group has. It's never too late for an adult of any age to learn a new language. The true advantage children have over adults is that they are naturally less afraid to make mistakes. Rather than feel this is a stamp for life, we should learn from children. Try to enjoy the language learning process and don't be afraid of a little embarrassment. Laugh at your mistakes and have fun with it, instead of being way too grown up about it or taking every minor slip up so seriously. In this sense, we can definitely learn from children. Children tend to absorb their first few thousand words entirely by human interaction, whereas adults learning another language may learn these from textbooks. Learning exactly like a baby is not wise, but we can aim to emulate many of the aspects of a child's learning environment that encourage real communication. Also, keep in mind that babies and young children effectively have full time teachers. Their parents, who laugh at their mistakes, thinking they are cute, have almost infinite patience and are overjoyed at every success. Imagine if an adult could find a native speaker so motivated to help. These are things you can seek to emulate in your own environment, such as spending more time with native speakers motivated to help you. These are not inherent advantages built into children, but aspects of their environments from which you can draw inspirations.